All right, welcome back to the channel. Today we have a unique video, something a bit different. I mentioned a while back that we eclipsed 500 subs on this channel, and I had sent out messages and requests for questions to do just a 500 sub Ask Me Anything. Thank you to everyone who provided questions, and thank you to everyone who subscribes to this channel. I never thought I would get anywhere close to 500 subscribers, and just the fact that there's this many of you who care enough to actually check out the channel and watch the videos is really cool, and it's really motivating, and it keeps me wanting to continue to improve. And my hope is that by answering these, it'll help out, not only the people who ask these questions, but other people who watch this channel as well. So without further ado, let's hop into the questions. You can see I put them all in a random spinning wheel here, and we will spin the wheel. Whatever question comes up, that's the one that I'll answer. And we'll go through each one of the questions. I think I have about 10 of them. So let's dive into it. All right, first question is, everyone loves 2014 World Cup Prizm and 2017 Topps Chrome long term. If you had to pick a third set, which set would you pick and why? Okay, so I'm going to approach this from the standpoint of the sets that I like, and maybe taking a step back. If we think about why 2014 Prizm and 2017 Chrome are popular, or sets that people are targeting, we have to kind of look at what boxes do they check, right? What are the fundamentals of those sets? 2014 Prizm, it's the first Panini Prizm set for soccer, first World Cup set. It contains, given the time that it was, at the time that it was printed, the sports card hobby was nowhere near, the boom that it experienced the last couple of years. So just the number of product printed for that set, I would assume, is relatively low compared to the sets that are coming out today. It also contains a number of legends of soccer. If you think about just some of, you think about the time frame, it's kind of that overlap between Lionel Messi's prime. You have guys like Luka Modric, but then you still have guys like Xavi, Iniesta. You have that set of historically great players as well. And for a lot of guys, it also includes their first World Cup, or really just their first notable modern soccer card. And so I think for that reason, 2014 Prizm will always be this iconic set, because it was really kind of the beginning of the modern soccer card sets, especially as you think of parallels and, gold and, just the different things like that. So that one, obviously. 2017 Topps Chrome, similar in that it was Topps Chrome's first foray into soccer cards, and also includes a number of key players and key cards. You have the Mbappe, which is considered one of his rookies. You have obviously Messi, Ronaldo. You have players like Luka Modric, Gareth Bale, Harry Kane, Mohamed Salah, Luis Suarez, just a ton of great modern day players, and a bunch of no-namers. And then I think what you also have here is just the Topps lineage of the basic refractors. You have the red to 10, you have the orange to 25, the gold to 50, the green to 99, the blue to 150, the purple to 250. There's just a simplicity of the set, and it also being Topps' first set in soccer, Topps Chrome's first set in soccer. So there you kind of have this first of kind, key players, notable parallels, things like that. So that's how I would kind of think about what a third set would be. The ones that come to mind, and again, these are not from a go invest in these sets, but just sets that, if I'm looking at what sets check similar boxes, which ones just stand out. Obviously, you have the 2018 treble set, which I think will be interesting to see how that ages long term, because short printed set, first of its kind, only of its kind so far. The parallels are very memorable and aesthetically pleasing. You have the full color parallel, the full card parallel. You obviously have a number of great players in the set. Vinicius Jr. rookies. You have Mbappe in there. You have Messi, Ronaldo, tons of other great players. And there was also just a mania about the set at one point where everybody's trying to dig them up from across the world. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out long term, just because it is a one and done set. Some people will argue that hey, this is a very limited set, so it's you don't have 10 years of it. Others will be like, well, does it really have historical significance if it's just 1 year? I think time will tell. I personally think that, I'm on the side of it being, it's a very scarce, significant set, but we'll see. That's one that could be. I think another one that I think is maybe more attainable for most people, and I think has a lineage, just given that it's a set that has recurred now for a few years, is Stadium Club Chrome. And the thing I love about Stadium Club Chrome, started in 2020, I believe. The 2020 set, again, you have the full color Topps parallels. There are obviously more than just the 6 parallels that there is in 2017, just because the more ultra modern you get, the more different types of parallels there are. But still, you have the golds, you have the orange, you have the red. You have a lot of like the notable parallels. Stadium Club actually also has some interesting and cool parallels. Some of like the lightning strike parallels that can be very short printed. I think there's 1 to 4 and 1 to 10. But the other thing about this set that I think is interesting is if you think about who are the big up and coming young players in soccer right now, a lot of them have rookie cards in that set. So Jude Bellingham, Jamal Musiala, Camavinga, Pedri, like you just have a lot of rookies in that set. And because of that, that set is also expensive. So opening boxes of it isn't as easy as some other sets. So it'll be interesting to see how it ages over time. The other thing I would say about Stadium Club Chrome that it has going in its favor is it's probably the most, from like a photography standpoint, probably has the best photography of any set. And so I think from that standpoint, it could become one that is highly collectible and highly desirable. Those would be the two that I think of off the top of my head. I'm not talking about anything like Flawless or Eminence or things like that, just because those are so high end that while I think there'll always be demand for those, it's just so unobtainable for, a majority of the hobby. So that's, I think what, I think Treble and Stadium Club are two that come to top of my mind. Would love to hear if anybody else has any thoughts on that, but that's how I'm kind of thinking about that right now. All right, let's spin it again. All right, the next question is... Okay, I think this is actually a good one because this is very similar to the last one, so I'm glad these got asked together. So which are the 3 soccer card sets that will still be relevant in the hobby in 20 years? I think based on the last answer, I would say 2014 Prizm. I would say 2017 Topps Chrome for the reasons that I talked about. I don't see those sets. I mean, we have to assume that in 20 years, if any sets are relevant, those 2 sets will be 2 of them. Assuming the hobby is alive and thriving in 20 years, which I believe it will be. But I'm just saying. And then, I think it's actually a toss up here because maybe Treble, if it gets enough, if enough people are collecting it and it becomes more difficult to get. It's already very short printed, so it'll be interesting to see just like how the sales play out and the demand for that set plays out over the next 20 years. Stadium Club, again, I mean, it's tough to say with stuff like Stadium Club. Like I like Stadium Club, but I don't know that it's reached, sort of the mainstream levels of importance yet. Another one I didn't mention in the last question that I think has potential to become one of the big sets is Merlin. But I would say only from a standpoint of, if you think about like baseball, where you have like Bowman Chrome, where prospects will have their first Bowman, where it's like, hey, here's the first time this prospect appears in our soccer card, in our sports card sets. And then when they get to Topps, they have like a rookie. If Topps started doing something like that with Merlin, where you had all these prospects that you could only find in Merlin, and then they would have a rookie at some point when they were in Topps Chrome or Topps Finest, then I think that Merlin could become one of these like relevant sets. Absent of that, I would say it's probably a toss-up between like 2018 Prizm, where you have a lot of the big notable players, Mbappe's first World Cup, and just like the national landmarks inserts. Like, you have a lot of things going for it there. And then, one of these other fringe sets. But I think 2014 Prizm and 2017 Chrome for sure. Yeah, and then I think the third one's kind of a toss-up amongst, either something that's like another Prizm, 2018 Prizm, or like a dark horse, like a Stadium Club that becomes very relevant over the next decade or so, or a Merlin that becomes relevant, you know, through just a repositioning of the product and like how Topps thinks about like rookies and prospects and things like that. Okay, keep it moving. Next question is, all right, what do you envision your hobby experience and collection looking like 20 years from now? So another like 20 years from now question. So it's a good question. So I think maybe to think about how I envision it looking 20 years from now, I'm going to look at how it evolved over the last few years. So like a lot of people, I joined the sports card hobby during the pandemic, was reconnecting with a lot of nostalgia that I had collecting cards as a kid. And I think during the pandemic, looking for things to do, maybe looking for another way to make some side income, you know, got into buying, grading, selling cards, thinking, oh, this is something I can, you know, make money doing. Obviously, we had the, you know, the bubble and it popped, and now we're, you know, in more of a correction phase. But I actually think that the phase of the market that we're in right now matches really well with where I'm at in my journey. And what I mean by that is, I think it's a really good market right now for collectors. A lot of there's still expensive cards, but there's not this like bubble or this mania. You know, a lot of cards are obtainable. There's plenty of different lanes that people can be in terms of what they want to collect or what type of cards they like. And so I hope that my hobby experience and collection 20 years from now, you know, I hope the experience is still very much what it is now, where I'm, you know, buying cards, grading cards, adding value to other collectors, adding, you know, chasing different collections for myself and making connections with other people, you know, even people who collect different types of cards or aren't, you know, don't collect soccer cards, or maybe they collect football cards. Like, I just really enjoy making connections with people in the hobby and learning about them, learning about their background, learning about how they approach sports card collecting, because it is this common thread that we all have where, you know, we like to take time to ourselves and experience these pieces of cardboard. And I hope to continue to lean into that and really strengthen those connections, obviously, over the next, you know, 20 years. In terms of my collection, so right now I'm chasing the 2017 gold refractor set. So I would hope that in 20 years I have all 99 of those. I'm also, as you know, people who follow me on Instagram know, building out, I think, a collection of Mohamed Salah cards that I think are relevant and notable. And so I hope that 20 years from now I have one of the coolest Mohamed Salah collections in the world. And then I'm sure there will be other sets or other players that pop up between now and then that give me a chase or give me a sense of purpose. I think that's what the 2017 gold set has done. It's given me a sense of purpose. It's given me something to chase. It's given me a reason to, you know, buy and grade and sell cards, and a focus to know, like, what am I buying? Why am I buying things? So I hope to continue to find different projects like that, different players like Mo Salah that I find a passion collecting, and just continuing to, broaden my connections across the sports card hobby, both within soccer and across all sports. Okay. Next question. Okay. All right, so this one I think came from one of the videos, and I thought it was a good question to add. So this one is, do you mainly buy singles off eBay and then grade them? So yeah, in terms of where I buy singles, so I do buy singles off eBay. One of the issues I found with eBay, depending on if you're buying from just a random person or if you're buying from like a consigner, is a lot of times cards on eBay can be cards that other people have already tried to grade and determine that they're ungradable. Similar with ComC. Similar with anywhere, right? But what I'm getting at is, like, because of that, I think it's good to look in different places. So I do look on eBay. I have many saved searches on eBay, and then, you know, do my due diligence on the condition and look at the pictures, and depending on who the seller is, right? I'll also buy cards off ComC if I can find deals and I can, you know, find cards that I think there's a decent likelihood they're in good condition. I also buy off overseas sites like Card Hobby in China. There's some like Mercari in Japan has some cards as well. Really just kind of grinding all over the place, trying to find different, singles that either are sets that I like or cards that I think other collectors might like. And it's really just a grind, honestly. It's just looking at a lot of different sites, being really disciplined around what I'm willing to pay for certain cards. I think it's easy to get carried away and want to just, you find a card, you want to buy it because you want to grade it, but being disciplined both in terms of if the description or the pictures look kind of off, not forcing it, and then, making sure that I'm buying within reason relative to comps, because ideally, you buy something and it's in good enough shape to send in and grade and get, at least a 9, but hopefully a 10. And if it's not, then you also don't want to be overextended on the card where you're taking like a massive loss either. So that's kind of how I think about it. It's kind of a longer answer for like a pretty simple question, but yes, I do buy singles off eBay and other sites. Then I look to grade them through the lens of just providing value to other collectors. So other people who might want to collect certain cards in certain grades, I'm willing to kind of do the work of finding those cards and grading them. And then I'll use that, any profit I make there, to fund my own collection. All right. All right. What are your thoughts on long-term potential of Kabooms versus Color Blast? So I guess I'll talk about this. I mean, I can talk about Kabooms specifically versus Color Blast, but I'll also just talk generally about these inserts and other insert sets. So it's funny because when I was a kid in the hobby, and when I got back into the hobby a few years ago, I actually always preferred inserts over base cards. Like, I just thought it was cool that, hey, these inserts are only one in every so many packs. And so like getting one was rare, right? Whereas like base cards come in every pack. Obviously parallels are more a thing now than they were in the 90s, but I've always liked inserts. And I especially like these super short print case hit type inserts because a lot of them are not numbered. And you kind of have to know about the set to know how rare they are. I think in general, this is just my 2 cents. This isn't necessarily investment advice or anything like that. But I think in general, I think these types of short print inserts, like if you just look back at like Michael Jordan collectors and what they collect from the 90s, or Kobe collectors, like some of these really popular basketball inserts like the Jambalaya and the Dunkin' Go Nuts, like some of these like really cool inserts from the 90s. I think, there's potential obviously for the same thing to happen to things like Kabooms, Color Blasts, etc. The only I guess downside would be like, okay, Kabooms come out every year, and if the same players are in Kabooms every year, then how many Kabooms, it almost becomes like oversaturation of super short printed inserts. So then maybe like the first Kabooms or Color Blast become more relevant. But ultimately, I think the market's going to decide that. I think like if money was no issue and I could collect Kabooms and Color Blasts of every player that I liked, I certainly would, just because I think they're cool. In terms of like what type of ROI they'll yield you 10, 20 years from now, I think that's hard to say. But I mean, if you think about just fundamentals of cards, you get in-demand players in rare cards, and that's kind of a recipe for value, assuming that the demand for those players, exceeds the supply of the cards. That's kind of how I would look at it. But I think in general, yeah, I think short printed inserts, parallels, things like that, I think are like sneaky ways to get really rare cards of players that you like. If we're talking Kabooms versus Color Blasts, my sense is that Kabooms are more popular just because they're like shinier and more like in your face. I don't know that means that they will or will not outperform Color Blasts. But in general, I like the potential of both longer term. All right, just a handful left here. Okay. Oh, it's a good one. Okay, so kind of long one. I'll read it. I saw you just picked up an SGC Gold Label Topps Chrome Gabriel Jesus. I was curious how you see the value shaking out long-term for SGC gold labels. How do you see their value doing over time? How do you price an SGC gold label currently? Do you have a formula, or is it just whatever you can get given the rarity? So this is an interesting question. For context, collecting the 2017 Topps Chrome Gold set, as I mentioned, I saw a Gabriel Jesus SGC Gold, which is like the pristine label, came up on eBay. And when I was looking at it, I looked at the pop reports, and it's actually the only SGC Gold label of any of the base Topps Chrome Gold refractors. So out of all gold refractors of the base gold refractors graded with SGC, it's the only gold label. So that immediately piqued my interest. Like, as I think about curating a set and what do I want in that set and how do I help that set stand out from other curated sets that other people have, I thought, man, this could be like a really cool card to have in there. So then when I started thinking about, okay, how would I value this card? I was thinking like, okay, well, in general, I would say PSA 10s are more valuable than SGC 10s, right? I think that's just like how the resale value shakes out. But if you look at the pop for Gabriel Jesus Gold Topps Chrome, I believe it's higher than, 1. So, and there's only one SGC 10 pristine and likely only ever going to be one. So I kind of thought of it as, even if I paid around PSA 10 or even a little higher than PSA 10 prices, it's probably a fair value in the sense that like there will never be more than one SGC Gold label, and there's probably going to be at least a few more PSA 10 golds, assuming they all get graded someday. So I kind of price it as like, ideally you get it around PSA 10, but maybe it's worth a little more than PSA 10, like kind of similar to like a Beckett, BGS 10, where it's just rare. It's just more rare than, given the grading scale. It's like you can get an SGC 10, but getting an SGC 10 gold label is like the top of the top. So I kind of look at it like that, where, hey, this is like a unique thing. Nobody else is going to have one of these, so it's probably worth something above a PSA 10. In terms of like long-term value, that's kind of how I look at it too, where I assume, SGC 10 gold labels are going to be in line or maybe higher than PSA 10s, just given that for any SGC 10 gold label you have, there's probably several or more PSA 10s of that card. So that's kind of how I think about it. Now, will the market think of it that way? I don't know. That's just how I think about it. I think SGC gold labels, similar to BGS 10s, especially the BGS 10 black labels, are more valuable than PSA 10s, just because from a grading and quality standpoint, the cards are equal or better. And from a rarity standpoint, SGC 10 gold labels and, BGS 10 black labels are much, much lower, much less, much more scarce than PSA 10s. All right. Okay. Which 3 players are underrated in the soccer card hobby right now? Man, this is a good question, and I don't know that I'm going to have a great answer. Let me just think about it. I mean, so we can think of overrated multiple ways. We can think about it through the lens of like their prices versus like what they've done. We can think about it like prices versus other players or other similar players. Or we could think about it like prices versus potential, which is probably more on like the prospecting side. I'm going to go based on like prices versus like the caliber of player they are or were. 2 that stick out to me are, I think Luis Suarez is really underrated. Underrated in the sense that if you look at his top, like if you were to measure players not on like their total like output of their career, but just like how high their peaks were. So you take like the peak of every player and then you compare all the peaks. I think Luis Suarez is much closer to guys like Messi than he is to a lot of other players. If you look at his 2013 season with Liverpool, where he basically almost carried them to a Premier League title, and you just look at some of the goals he scored in that season and how easy he made those goals look, it's insane. Like, for example, I think at the time he scored like 31 or 32 Premier League goals that season. Obviously, Erling Haaland has the record now recently. But if you look at Haaland's goals, you look at all Haaland's goals that he scored in his record season, and you look at all Suarez's goals that he scored in 2013, like, if you just made a highlight reel of just all the goals and you showed it to everyone, there's nobody who would think Erling Haaland is a better player than Luis Suarez. Nobody. Because that's how good Suarez was. He also had some pretty peak years at Barcelona, granted playing alongside Messi. So I'm not saying that he's as good as Messi. I'm just saying from a peak and the heights that he reached, not necessarily the consistency or longevity, but just how good he was at his peak. There are a few players that I've seen that were that good. So I think he's definitely underrated. I think he gets lost in the shuffle, especially against guys like Messi and Ronaldo, just given his time and his career and like when his career took place. I think another one in a similar vein is Thomas Müller, Bayern Munich in Germany. Dude has just been doing it for years, like scoring goals, winning titles, just a consistently significant part of really good teams. And for whatever reason, his cards are just seemingly like way too cheap, at least relative to other guys' cards. So he'd be another one I would say. And then a third one, I'm trying to think. I mean, there's so many. Like, I think Modric cards are starting to see a little more steam, rightly so. I think Harry Kane might be kind of underrated still. Just if you look at just the body of work, the amount of goals he scored at the, in the Premier League, like the top league in the world, and now he's in the Bundesliga, just crushing too. He's another one I would think is kind of underrated. I don't know. And as far as like young guys, it's tough because I think Jude Bellingham is great, but he has so many cards. So if anything, it's hard to say his like card prices are too low, just given how much supply he has. And it's similar for a lot of those younger guys. I guess that's what I would say. I know that I'm missing someone, and I'm sure that people will have plenty of qualms with my answer, but would love to hear if like who did I miss? Who else am I not thinking of? Because I think there's a lot, especially some of these guys that are like really good, great players, but just happen to play in the same era as like some of the greatest players. I think those are the types of guys that I would lean to here. All right, 3 more, getting there. Thanks again for tuning in, and thanks for following along, and thanks again for supporting the channel. Okay, what would you do if starting from 0? What lessons, first steps, etc.? Okay, so I didn't follow up on exactly the context of this question, so I'm going to approach it through a couple different realms. I'm going to approach it one through like if I was starting with 0 subscribers, like from a content creation standpoint. And then I'll do it also like if I was starting from 0 in terms of like my collection or my bankroll type thing. So I think from a content standpoint, starting from 0, and maybe this is like advice I would give somebody else who's thinking of starting, is one, I think you just have to start. Like, you're not going to get things perfect. I mean, I'm on video, I don't know, I've done like 40 videos and I still think they suck, right? The first ones are definitely going to suck. So you have to just kind of start and get comfortable recording and get comfortable editing and just get comfortable doing the whole thing. And then over time, you'll start realizing like what works, what you can improve on, what types of videos people, respond to versus like what types of videos maybe there isn't as much interest in. And then I think another thing, and something that I need to get better at myself, is being consistent, right? I think there's a lot of good content creators out there who they have a very consistent, like not only like type of content that they deliver, but also just cadence. So like Soccer Study is a good one where every week or like other week, there's an interview with a collector. And then there's also a, more of like a market deep dive, more like theory-based thing. And it comes, it comes like clockwork. I think Carlson Cards is another one who, there's PSA reveals, there's fun videos like cracking, cracking and resubmitting type videos. And then there's always like Carlson Cards podcast with another collector. Like I think stuff like that is good because one, like being consistent is what's going to get the YouTube algorithm to like surface your video to other people. But two, it's like being consistent not only keeps you engaged and focused on making content and like high quality content, but it also lets people following your channel know, oh, okay, like I know every week I'm going to get another interview or I'm going to get another topic from this creator, from this person. So I think going forward, like one thing I want to do is definitely have more of a consistent like cadence of like, this is what I'm going to provide each week or every other week or whatever. I've thought about doing like a podcast and really like coming up with topics that I enjoy talking about, that I can authentically talk about, that I also think would benefit people in the sports card hobby. And then similarly, like doing some sort of like interview thing where just uncovering like different sides of collectors, right? I think that's compelling. I think that's interesting. I think that helps make connections across the hobby, which I talked about earlier, but I think it also helps grow the hobby by, shining a light on certain collectors or certain strategies or just certain topics that help others or just, light a path for others. So I think that's something. I mean, another one I should have mentioned that is a big inspiration for me is the Stacking Slabs podcast. I was actually listening to the Stacking Slabs podcast when I first got into the hobby back in 2020. And the fact that Brett is still consistently making videos week after week is awesome and super motivating and super inspiring, just in terms of like the blueprint of what it looks like to build a successful, podcast or content engine, right? So that's what I would do if I was starting from zero. I think it's really just consistency. I think it's not worrying about making mistakes, learning on the fly, and being like open and honest with your learnings. And then really just like having fun with it. Like that's what this is all supposed to be, right? Like I don't do this for a job. I do it because I enjoy it. And I think that's what we should all be doing. In terms of if I was starting from zero in terms of my bankroll, I've shared in some videos what I did and some mistakes I made. And I think the biggest thing I would do is I would do more research before I started buying anything. And the reason for that is twofold. One, I just think it's important to know what you're getting into before you start allocating money or resources to something. But two, and this actually goes to a conversation or a message conversation I had with LAFC Gooner on Instagram once, is like focusing on like what's the goal of my collection, right? Like the advice he gave me that always sticks with me was, if I'm collecting Mohamed Salah, which I am, it's like going through and understanding like what are all the sets that Mohamed Salah is in, what are his best cards, like literally ranking his best cards like 1 to 100, right? And assigning like a price point, like how much do I think that card would cost? And really just trying to see like which of those cards can I afford, or which of those cards are within my budget, and then making a plan to like target those cards and being disciplined targeting those cards, because then over time you build out this collection that is representative not only of the player or the person or the team you're collecting, but also has value just from a objective standpoint, right? And that was something that always stuck with me. And another reason it really resonated with me was because I spent so much money, like historically, I spent so much of my like bankroll or whatever on just like buying and grading and trying to sell, like flip cards basically, which is fine. But if you take the money that I would have spent on these like random cards or cards that I thought looked cool, that like maybe it would be cool to own this card, but like I didn't really have a reason to have it in my collection, I could have spent like less money on like a really cool Mohamed Salah card and just had that in my collection, right? And so that's something I've been really trying to embrace. It's another reason why I started focusing on the 2017 gold set, is because having a focus and having something that I'm targeting, it helps block out the rest of the noise. And it helps me focus on, I'm buying 2017 Topps Chrome Gold, I'm buying specific Mohamed Salah cards. When other Mohamed Salah cards come up that don't meet that criteria, I'm not just like throwing bids at them, right? It's like I'm focused on, these are the types of cards that I'm collecting. So that's what I would probably do from the start, is just have a much clearer like roadmap and game plan of, here are the cards I'm targeting and here's what they cost. and then using like the raw to grade to try and build up funds to obtain those cards. So I hope that answered the question, at least from one of those two angles, but I hope both were helpful. All right, two more. Which one will it be? All right. Even though we love 2017 Topps Chrome, some cards of key players, Mbappe, Messi, Ronaldo, etc., pop up for sale often in green, blue, purple parallels. This makes them feel less scarce compared to 2014 World Cup Prizm. Do you think this could deter the set's growth? I think this is a really good question. I actually also quite agree that 2017 Chrome comes up more often than 2014 Prizm. I think there's a couple of ways to answer this question. So I think if you think about it, like even Mbappe, Messi, Ronaldo, so green is out of 99, blue is 150, purple is 250. So right there, that's like 499 cards that these players have. And so it's like, that's not nothing, right? Like it's pretty reasonable to expect that these cards would come up often. I would be a little more concerned if like the Mbappe red was coming up all the time, or, you know, some of those really key cards, because then it just looks like, okay, these cards are just being like flipped from one flipper to another. But I mean, I know for sure off the top of my head, I know of people collecting green. I know of people collecting blue. I'm sure people are collecting purples. And I think the way I look about the growth of the set in the context of this question is not so much like, I think a lot of people always want to know about the value of a set. And like, obviously, like when we buy cards, we don't want to buy cards that are going to go to zero. Like ideally, like the things we collect would also hold value or appreciate over time. But I think the fact that these come up often for now, and it goes back to like the type of market we're in right now, I think is a good thing, because I think it enables more collectors to try and get in to cards that they want to get into. And the price points, especially, you know, in some of the purples, is not crazy. Like you could get a Messi purple PSA 10 for not like an insane amount of money. And I think that's a good thing. I think overall, like I like that these are more dispersed. I think it's good that they're more dispersed and not being held by the same people. But that being said, like if you were somebody who wanted to collect green or blue or purple or other parallels, this is probably a really good time to be doing it, just because these cards are coming up and the market itself is not super hot. And if and when the market does get hot again, these are probably the cards that are going to be in demand. In terms of related to 2014, you know, I think 2014 is kind of its own. I mean, it's an older set. It's 3 years older. I think anybody who has, you know, purchased or graded that set knows it's very condition sensitive, especially on the back with the borders. And I think a lot of people who have that set, they're obviously not, you know, selling it as often as a lot of the you know, the Topps Chrome stuff. I would also be interested to know, in, you know, for 2014, just like the geographic disparity of, or you know, disbursement of that set versus say a Topps Chrome. I don't know that they would be necessarily more geographically dispersed, but it's possible given that it's a World Cup set, which could also lead to some of the, you know, the idea that it doesn't come up as often for sale as some of the Topps Chrome stuff. But it's a great question. I think it's a valid question. I don't know that it necessarily hinders the growth or like the popularity of 2017 Chrome. I think if anything, like if you're seeing these cards come up for, you know, often now, it's probably an opportunity to try and get in and buy some of those, because eventually people will buy them. You know, people like myself who are collecting, and then they won't really come up for sale as often. So that's kind of how I look at it. But again, this is one of those that only time will tell as we, you know, 5 years from now, like if these are still coming up as often, like, you know, then that could be, you know, could be something to monitor. All right. Last one. Last question. Yeah, this was kind of fun. I need to use the spinning wheel a little more often. All right. Another question that came from a video. Do you recommend consignment these cards, the ones that I had in the video, or just put them on your personal eBay. So the context here was a PSA order I came back with. The question is like, would you consign those cards or would you put them on your personal eBay? I know I've talked to a number of other people about this topic. So I'll give you my point of view, and then maybe I'll give you a couple of considerations that might help you to make this decision. So I actually like selling cards on eBay. There's just something about the process of listing them and selling them and packaging them and sending them directly to the person buying them that maybe it just makes me feel more like connected to the hobby and connected to that person's, collecting journey. So I enjoy it. So in general, like I am okay putting things on my personal eBay versus consigning them. The types of things that I have put on my personal eBay are things that are maybe a little more unique. So for example, something that I want to just, maybe it's a pop one. Like an example I'll give is I have a Giovanni Reina 2020 Stadium Club Chrome Gold Refractor PSA 10 that I just got back in one of my videos, or in a video that will be coming. And that one is a pop one, which was actually kind of surprising, but that's one where I'm more inclined to put it on my personal eBay as a buy it now and accept offers versus just sending it to consignment, because one, I'm not in as big of a rush to sell it, and two, I don't want to necessarily hurt the resale value by sending it to auction and having it be a card that maybe not a lot of people are monitoring or looking for, and then it sells for way below like what it could sell for. An example of something I would send to consignment, or a card I have sent to consignment, is something like a Jude Bellingham rookie card or Cristiano Ronaldo 2015 Select Blue PSA 10, where, it's a very notable player. It's a set that there's demand for. It's a PSA 10. I can send that to Golden or whoever and consign it and know that I'm probably going to get close to max value on the resale. So it really kind of depends. I think the factors, the considerations that I would think about is what type of player is it? Like, is it more of a niche player, or is it somebody who's in high demand? And you could sell it, either in that regard, but just like that's one, like maybe if it's more of a niche player, you put on your own eBay because it's going to take a little while to sell. Maybe if it's high demand, that's more likely you go to consignment because there's a liquid market for it. Similar to like, is the card liquid, right? Like if we're talking about like a Jude Bellingham Sapphire rookie and there's hundreds graded and they always sell for like $120 in a PSA 10 and 60 in a 9 or whatever, you can send that to consignment because you basically know what you're going to sell it for at auction, right? If it's I don't know, Tyler Adams Select Gold out of 10, it's, that's just a little more niche that maybe you want to send that to, or put that on your own eBay, just because, again, like you're going to have to wait for somebody who's like a Tyler Adams or a U.S. men's national team fan to find that card and make you an offer. The other consideration too is like, just how much do you like or dislike shipping and eBay and admin and all that stuff? Personally, I don't mind it. I like being involved. I like making the sales and tracking it and all that stuff. But if you hate shipping, or you don't like going to the post office, or you don't like dealing with questions or listing things, then just send it to consignment, because that's like the whole point. They take care of it all for you. So the answer to the question, as I said, is both. I will put some on my eBay and send some to consignment. And depending on your preferences and the types of cards you're buying, hopefully the considerations I gave you will help make that decision for you. So, all right. Well, that'll do it for the questions. You can see the wheel's empty. If you made it this far, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you learned something. I hope you got some value out of this video. And thank you so much for being a subscriber to the channel. It means a lot. It's motivating. It makes me want to continue to deliver more value and bring more content to the sports card hobby. On that note, I will talk to you guys again soon. Thanks again for tuning in. Talk to you later.